Hello and welcome. I thought we would do this cute little Santa that my son sent me from New York City. It's hand carved, hand painted. It's even signed on the bottom. It's a beautiful piece. So I thought, oh, let's paint it. It would make such a cute painting. Now we're not copying it exactly. I already did one so that I could test it out and show you how to do it. We've got him traced out on a piece of 5x7. I have some vermilion hue here, and that's what we're going to use for his clothes. It's a nice, beautiful Christmassy red. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to get some of this vermilion red out on my palette. Now you can use any red. You don't have to use vermilion. That's just the color that I'm really in love with right now for Christmas. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start painting all the areas that we want to be red. And then I'm coming back, lifting a little bit of that out right in the center of his cap with a damp, dry brush so that I can lift it and then it'll be like a little highlight there. And we're going to do the rest of his clothes with this red. He is such a cutie pie. I just love this piece. Now I put the paint down and then I went and put my brush in the water so that I could blend it out. So it'll be a little bit more transparent. That's what I was doing. So we put the paint down and then we got some water on the brush and it just sort of blended it out. Now in some areas, I'm just putting a little bit more of that red, and then in some of the areas, I'm lifting some of it so that it looks like the folds of his gown or robe, or I don't even know what this is called. I guess it's a robe. And we're just going to do his little arms here. And then lift a little out so that it's not just a flat red. We don't want it to be too flat, too one tone all the way across. We want to give it a little bit of variation. And now I am just going to paint his outer coat. And I'm being careful not to paint the trim. He's got fur trim on his coat. And of course lifting a little bit of it here and there just so that, again, you'll have some definition. See, his coat is actually hanging off of his back. And so those are his sleeves here that we're painting now, the sleeves of his overcoat, I guess. And so we're just painting those sleeves, and they're just sort of hanging. He just sort of has it hanging off of his shoulders. He doesn't have his arms in those little sleeves. He's probably fixing to eat dinner or something. I don't know why he's taking his coat off and got it hanging on his back. We don't know, but that's what he's doing. Now I am getting a little bit of that darker red, which is more of a cooler red, and I'm going to do the other areas of his clothing. Excuse me. And I'm just doing it straight on a dry paper with all of this. So you can use an alizarin crimson here if you would like to, a permanent rose, whatever sort of bluey red that you have, purpley red. But that is just to contrast it with the more warm, a little bit more warm Christmas red. And I'm just pulling up a little bit of it in the center. Now you can make this darker if you want to. On my original one, I made it much darker. These darker areas, these more alizarin crimson areas, I made it darker on my original one, but we're just going to go with this. This is what we're doing. But again, you can use alizarin crimson to make it a little bit darker. Now I'm just taking a little bit of orange and a little bit of that rosy, permanent rose color, mixing those together. I'm trying to get a nice skin tone. You can even add a touch of ultramarine blue to that if you'd like, but I'm just going to go ahead with just the orange and the rose color. I'm going to paint all over his face except for his eyes. I'm not going to paint his eyes because I'm going to come back and paint those blue. And blue over orange makes gray, so I want them to be blue. While it's still wet, I'm going into that rosy color, and I'm just adding it to his cheeks and tip of his nose to give him a little winter glow. You know, when you're riding in that sled, that wind is hitting you in the face, and it hit the camera, and it just it makes your face have a little red glow to it. He's a little windburned. And I'm going to take that same pink and do his little lips here. I didn't like that, so I'm kind of erasing it with some water. And I'm just going to go back in with a little bit of that darker pinky red, that sort of rose color red. So now I am getting some burnt umber, and I'm mixing it with just a little bit of burnt sienna, so it'll have a little bit of a reddish brown tint. I'm also kind of mixing up some of my Dr. Martin's bleed proof white, but I want it to be more white, so I'm going to have to dip some straight out of the jar. You can't see it. I didn't realize it was off camera. Sorry about that, but there's some white over there. And I'm getting into that darker brown, and I'm just going to paint the fur trim on his jacket here, on his robe. I guess it's more of a robe than a jacket. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to go ahead and dip into that bleed proof white. Even though there's a little bit of brown in it, it's fine. And then I'm just going to drop it in while it's wet, and it will spread and look like fur. So I really like that effect that it gives while it's still wet. So just make sure once you get that brown down there that you go ahead and drop in your bleed proof white. You could probably use white gouache too, but I just had that handy. I had my Dr. Martin's pH handy, so that's what I'm using. So I'm going to continue with this fur trim, doing the same technique, putting that dark brown color down first, and then going ahead and dropping in a little bit of the white. And I'm trying to make it go all in the same direction that it needs to be going. And then I'm coming in, and in between those little spots of white, I'm also adding just a little bit more brown that's a little bit darker, and that sort of helps blend them and bleed them, and it also just gives you more variations in tone for the fur. And you don't want just white and brown. You want a little dark brown in there, a little light brown in there. So adding that darker brown in between those little marks of white, and let it just blend. Let that water do the work. It just kind of blends it all, and it looks just like, well, not just like fur, but it gives a really nice fur effect. So now we are going to go ahead and do this ruffle, this fur ruffle around his head, his collar. And I'm making it a little bit darker on the top and the bottom and lighter in the center, just so that it gives it some dimension. And again with the white. And you hear my little dove. He is cheering us on. See how that sort of mixes and mingles and looks like a nice little fur effect. So we're going to do the other side of his little fur collar here. And again, I'm putting a little extra paint at the bottom, maybe a little extra at the top, so it looks lighter in the center. And then going ahead with that white, putting that in there. Just dropping it in there. And then I'm going to put in a little bit of the darker brown, just to give it some dimension. And then we're going to do these sleeves of his coat that's hanging off of his back here. I don't know why, but I have left off this one. Let's go back and get his other cuff. I forgot all about it. I'm go ahead and paint that in brown, do the same technique. Sometimes I get going so fast, I just skip over stuff, so you're going to have to give me some grace. There we go. Very nice. And my little Mr. Dorian Gray, he is cheering us on. He is loud today. Go ahead and get that fur around the top of his cap, or around the rim of his cap. And we do the same exact technique. No surprises here. This is really not a difficult little painting to do, but it would just make a cute little card. You could make a little ornament out of this to hang on your tree. You could do all kinds of things with this. A little gift tag. He is just as cute can be. Now I'm switching to my really, really tiny brush, and I'm getting a little bit of cerulean blue. Putting it on my palette just a little, because we're going to do his eyes. See, his eyes are so blue, so we're just going to stick with sort of we're not copying the Santa exactly, but we're kind of staying in the same general area of what he looks like. So I put that blue in his eyes. I left a little bit of the white of the paper showing through. so that he looks like he's got highlights. Now I am taking some of my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, painting in his eyebrows. He's got some cute little eyebrows there. I'm getting my brush ready, and that's the bleed proof white. That's what it looks like. You can use white gouache if you would like. You don't have to use that. It's just what I have handy and using right now. So I'm getting a little bit of permanent rose, and I am getting a little bit more of that orange. I want to mix up another flesh tone, and this time I want it to be a little more orangey, a little darker, because it's going to be the shadows around his face. So we're going to put a shadow just sort of under his little cap. I'm getting a little bit of this lemon yellow too to brighten it up some. And we are going to put that little shadow under his cap, around his face, and under his nose, a little shadow under his nose onto his beard. And then in the crease of his eyelids, and then down the sides of his nose, so that we can start bringing that nose out. Looks like he's got a nose. It's not just flat on his face. And around his beard, we'll put a little bit of shadow. You can put them wherever you think that looks the best. Wherever you think a nice shadow would be cast. And I'm putting a little bit more on the very tip of his nose, so that you can see the tip from the two side nostrils. Just sort of separate those out a little bit. Give his nose a little bit more dimension. Now we are going to start working on this silver. This is a silver metallic watercolor. And instead of doing blue in his beard, I'm going to use this silver to make him a little glitzy, because I want him to have a little shine to him. A little sparkle and shine. So I'm just using that silver. As you see, he doesn't have silver on him. I'm just going with what I think would look nice and festive. You do what you want to do. If you want to make his shadows in his beard like a blue, a cerulean blue or a cobalt blue or something like that, go ahead. Perfectly fine. Now I'm going in and getting into my gold, my metallic gold. We're going to paint his mittens on both sides. Or both mittens. And we're just painting those sort of flat. It's okay. We're going to come back and paint a design over them. And go ahead and get this little design on his robe. Just these little circles. Go ahead and paint that in. Paint his little sort of rickrack he's got going on down here. And he is looking rather cute. All right, let's see what we're going to do next. I'm going to come in here and get this dark, sort of darkish rose color, or you can use alizarin crimson, and just paint in some of the creases in his little robe. And then just taking some clear water, blending those out, just to give it a little bit of dimension. Put a little shadow underneath this sort of, it might be a belt. I'm not sure what he's wearing right there, but we're going to put a shadow under it. And then I'm just taking and lifting some of that back up so that he'll have a little bit of light in there. It's not all one color. All right, he's looking pretty good, pretty good. Got some dabs on there and get them up before they make a stain on my paper. So now I'm going to paint that bell. I've got a little bit of just sort of a nice lemony yellow color. And I'm painting around that bell. I'm leaving a little bit of light areas, a little bit of the paper shining through, just a little bit. And I'm going to come back in with a little bit of yellow ochre and darken that yellow up for some shadows here and there. Now I have gotten some Payne's Gray and I'm just painting in his eyelashes while we let that bell dry a little bit. And then painting in just like right under his eyelashes, just a little shadow. Put in a little pupil, just a little tiny black dot in the center of that blue so that he has some eyeballs. I mean, pupils, eyeballs. Well, yeah, now he has eyeballs. There we go. And now I am going to work a little bit on something here. Let's come back in here and get some of this gold and just make the little dots, the little shiny dots on his robe. He's got a little pattern on there. So we're just going to go ahead. And you can use a darker metallic if you like. It's up to you. You can use a darker red so that the metallic shows up better. Again, up to you. I'm just going to put those in there. And you can't really see on the camera, but when you move the paper, it just glitters and shines, and it's really, really pretty. So get those on there. And let's see what else we're going to do. Let's get some more white. Some more bleed-proof white, and I want it to be pure white. I don't want it to be that mixed brown. And we're just going to do the dots across his little rick-rack down here, across his little design. And Dorian is cheering us on. He is such a loud dove to be so tiny. He is a tiny little dove. He fit in the palm of my hand, but he is a loud thing. Now let's just paint these little designs here. I really like this little Santa. My son always gets me like little Santas, handmade Santas almost every year. They're usually carved. I think he just loves these wooden hand carved Santas. He's got me 2 or 3 in the last couple of years. So there seemed to be a theme with him that he likes those. And I like them too. They're beautiful to me, but I love anything that's handmade, because anything made from someone's hand and not a computer or not, some kind of machine, to me is always more special, more valuable to me. It has a lot of value in it for me. Now, some people don't feel that way, but I do. I love to get a handmade gift. So now I am just going and putting in some more of the details. These are all up to you. And what I've done was I mixed a little bit of blue with that white, with that opaque white, that bleed-proof white, so that I would get a nice light blue. And then I'm just using some white to go around the designs. And we're going to just add some shadows to that bell. We're getting pretty close to finish. And we're just going to add some shadows with a little bit of that deeper red. Just add some shadows on his coat so that we can separate his robe that he's wearing from the coat that's hanging on the back of his shoulders. We want them to be differentiated. We don't want them to look exactly the same. Gives him more dimension. So we're going to go ahead in there with a little darker red, and then we're just going to pull that up. And by darker red, I'm just mixed the sort of bluey red with that vermilion hue to get a darker red. And let's darken up this little area up here. I want it to be darker. I'm trying not to get into that wet white so that it doesn't bleed pink. I just think that needs to be darker up there. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the vermilion and add a little bit of shadow onto his hat on the sides near the bottom where the fur cuff is. Just trying to clean him up a little bit and give him a little bit more spice. And now we're just going to add the design. It's a little wet, and those designs up there are red, but I'm going to make mine white so that they show up, and just do these little dots here with white. I'm just changing up a little bit because I don't have the exact colors that were used on this Santa, so I'm making him my own. I'm making him the way I want to. Add a little white highlighter across the bell. And there you go, a beautiful Santa. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this.